Food is fuel for your body, your mind, and definitely your sport. But let's face it, nutrition is confusing, and the expectations on girls and women to be thin and have a six-pack are exhausting. If you've ever been frustrated with your body, confused about nutrition, obsessed with eating healthy, or guilty when you don't, underate, overate, or overtrained, and overwhelmed with all the pressure, then this podcast is for you. Nutrition can be easy, you can take control of it, but it might start with letting go of control by asking for help and making a change. I'm Lindsay Elizabeth Cortez, sports dietitian and owner of Rise Up Nutrition, where I empower female athletes to overcome nutrition concerns and perform at their highest level, to stop being confused by all the mixed or harmful messages, and finally have confidence in your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete.
Fans, welcome to the show. It's Lindsay Elizabeth Cortez, registered sports dietitian and your host of the podcast. I've got another solo episode with fast fueling facts. This is my new little series. I'm not sure how many episodes I'm going to do as of this moment, but I have lots of ideas scribbled in my notebook for fast fueling facts, just quick solo episodes to get some facts to you, straight up nutrition information. We'll have more guests coming on the show soon, but I thought this would be some great content that you could easily refer back to if you're struggling with your nutrition or need to send to a friend or teammate or female athlete who's trying to tweak their nutrition for optimized performance. Last episode, we covered pre- and post-workout fueling, just your basic guidelines. Of course, nutrition is individualized for everybody, but our basic sports nutrition guidelines to start from. Today's episode, we're going to dive into during training fuel. We're not going to touch on the hydration piece. That will be another fast fueling facts episode. Today is just about the fuel during training. I'm super excited to present this information to you, but first, please hear me out as I give you some updates and remind you of how you can support the show. If you like this show at all, I would strongly encourage you to head to femaleathletenutritionpodcast.com and click that support button to consider making a financial contribution, even just $1 a month, $5 a month, whatever you're willing, to help us continue to put in the time, effort, and resources to put this amazing content out there. I'm so passionate about helping female athletes fuel their bodies better. There's some resources out there right now, some people I respect, but I just feel like there's still such a gap. And I really want to keep doing my part, and your support and financial contribution would make a huge difference. So head to femaleathletenutritionpodcast.com, hit the support button. You can also subscribe to our email list. I'm trying to actually get a lot better about putting out quick emails and blog posts for even more content. If you're a podcast listener, wonderful. You like that audio, but maybe reading hits it in a different way for you. I know personally, I'm actually working on writing. More about that later, but I'm working on writing and just reading content. Sometimes it sticks a little differently when you can read it. So you can subscribe to our email list to get more written content as well. Follow us on Instagram, female.athlete.nutrition. And while you're on our website or our Instagram account, be sure to check out my affiliate links, partner companies. This podcast is not technically sponsored. However, I do have some discount codes of companies and brands and products that I simply believe in. There's many products and companies out there that might benefit you or other female athletes, but here are just a few that I think are helpful. And I want to share discount codes to you and affiliate links to make it easier for you to apply it into your own life. So both on my Instagram page, I have a story highlight on the website, femaleathletenutritionpodcast.com/affiliate partners. You can get a bunch of discount codes and links to help you out. Today, I specifically want to highlight something new that I haven't highlighted before. And it's actually a program called That Clean Life geared towards other dietitians and health professionals. I've been using That Clean Life for over 5 years, actually since the inception of establishing my own business. It is an online recipe and meal plan software and database. Now, if you know anything about me, you might be thinking clean. Does Lindsay really like that word as it pertains to what it means around nutrition? Well, one of the reasons I love that clean life is because of their wide variety of recipes. I am a very all-inclusive dietitian. Non-restrictive diets are my jam. But every once in a while, I have that client come to me who is allergic to eggs or does have celiac disease or is vegan, and they have these very specific nutrition needs. And what I love about that clean life is how you can filter through a database of thousands of recipes and you can say, I need something that is gluten-free and egg-free. You can also then customize your search to say, hey, I want a meal that's got at least 600 calories because I'm working with an athlete here, or I need something that's got 80 grams of carbs, or I need something that's low fiber. And you can filter out the nutrition information and search through thousands of tried and tested recipes that you can then give to your clients. You can also take a recipe and customize it. So sometimes I find a gluten-free recipe that I have a client, I don't need it to be gluten-free. I can customize it. I can swap that out for regular pasta, or maybe I need a bigger portion of carbohydrates for my female athletes. I can customize that recipe, tailor it to change the portions. I can also take those individual recipes and I can put them into a weekly meal plan. I cannot express to you how much that clean life has been a staple in my business to getting recipes, menus, meal plans, snack ideas out to my clients. And on top of the ease of use and the need in my business, I also want to say that they are beautiful. The imagery and how your PDFs come out, it's just beautiful. So we'll have a link in the show notes or head to the website, femaleathletenutritionpodcast.com. We have an affiliate partner page, or head straight to www.get.thatcleanlife.com/female-athlete-nutrition. Thank you for your support, and let's get to the episode now. Okay, so let's talk about during training fuel. So first and foremost, if you are consuming an adequate diet, whew, this is a rough way to start an episode. How the heck do I distinguish what's adequate or not? But let's just assume you've got a decent diet, a variety of ingredients, good carbs, proteins, fats all throughout your day. If you've got a decent, adequate diet, if your training session is less than 60 minutes long, it is unlikely that you need any fuel during your training. I'm not saying you can't. If you want it, if you're feeling dizzy, if your diet was inadequate, if you didn't get that pre-workout in, there are exceptions, but ultimately, if your diet's adequate, then you shouldn't need fuel during training if it's less than 60 minutes. Now, anything over 60 minutes, you do strongly want to consider during training fuel. The biggest reason for that is to help prevent fatigue. As you are training longer, you are burning through your energy stores, notably carbohydrate, blood glucose, and muscle glycogen. So as that begins to dip, you want to refill your carbohydrate stores so you don't bonk, so you don't lose energy, so that you don't fatigue by carbohydrate depletion. That's a major factor for fatigue. Now, there's other reasons for fatiguing during training. I mean, muscle fatigue just happens even independent of carbohydrate intake. It might be because of lactate buildup, fat oxidation rates, but through research, we also know that a big reason for energy and muscle fatigue during training is because that muscle carbohydrate availability is depleting. So as you continue to consume carbohydrates throughout your workout, during these endurance workouts, anything longer than an hour, then that will help prevent fatigue from kicking in and help you perform longer or perform better longer. So because it's over an hour, maybe your mind is automatically thinking like endurance workouts, and we have a lot of endurance research in this area. However, I definitely want intermittent stop and go sports to strongly consider this. That's very common for soccer or basketball practices and games, obviously, to be 90 minutes long. Volleyball, games and practices and training sessions that might be stop and go, but if it's over an hour, I still want you to consider during training fuel. Strength training as well, if it is over an hour, I want you to consider during training fuel. So how much do you need? So let's say that your workout is between 1 to about 2.5 hours. The carbohydrate recommendation is 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour. You can consume this all at once or space it out. There's a lot of research, especially in the realm of carbohydrate beverages, where you can take sips of carbohydrate every 10 to 15 minutes spaced throughout that hour and being really beneficial to maintaining steady carbohydrate levels, therefore energy levels, preventing fatigue. But we also have a lot of sports products, obviously real food and bars that you would just, consume a bar or a carbohydrate gel that would give you 30 grams, all within the 5 minutes that you eat it. Now, what works for you? 30 grams, 40 grams, 50 grams, 60 grams? There's a couple of things that will dictate that. And one of them might be what type of training or sport are you engaging in? So again, those stop and go sports or something where, hey, I did 40 minutes and then I'm 20 minutes of rest and then I'm going to go another 40 minutes hard. You might be on that 30, 40, or 50 gram range, whereas something that is more continuous movement, glycogen depletion, carbohydrate depleting training, so distance swimming, rowing, running, that's where you might be more of the 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour. It also might have nothing to do with your sport and might have everything to do with just you and how your body feels or gut tolerance. There's a lot of factors, so it's a little bit of trial and error in what works for you. Now, if you are training or competing longer than 2.5 hours, you are going to need more carbohydrate per hour because you're burning through more and there's the cumulative load and cumulative effect of carbohydrate depletion. And frankly, if you're doing a 3-hour training session, you probably missed a meal or a snack that you otherwise would have had in your day. So you're losing a lot more calories, carbohydrate, energy. And so you need to consume more. Traditionally, sports nutrition recommendations have said 60 to 70 grams of carb per hour, up to 90 grams if tolerated. The if tolerated meaning if tolerated by your gut, your GI system. Lots of people, as they are training, do run into GI issues with absorption. They might find they feel nauseous. They might struggle with the runs, diarrhea, pooping, maybe even throwing up during your training or competition. And so the amount you need to consume more to prevent fatigue, but you also don't want to consume so much that it's upsetting your stomach, which would also inhibit performance. So up to 90 grams if tolerated. This research is coming down to what your gastrointestinal system can actually absorb per hour. So a lot of research says that the maximal absorption rate from your intestines of carbohydrate is 1 to 1.1 grams of carbs per minute. So if there's 60 minutes in an hour, it's going to be about 60 to 66 grams per hour. So that's where it's coming from. However, if you are mixing different carbohydrate sources, coming down to those actual sugar molecules. So if you are consuming something that mixes glucose and fructose, then you can ingest and absorb more because they have different receptor sites in your intestine. So a glucose receptor is different than a fructose receptor. These are two simple sugars. Your next simple sugar that we find is galactose, which is very rarely that's in lactose products. And it's actually rarely, if ever, found singularly. Somebody can fact check me on that if you'd like, but I don't think galactose is ever found individually, except for after the lactose has been absorbed. So if you're consuming a lactose-free milk that actually is dairy, but it just has a lactase enzyme in it, then you are probably consuming galactose sugar. Sorry if that was a side tangent. You're not going to see galactose in any sports nutrition products. You're going to see fructose. You're going to see glucose. You might also see some different names for glucose, by the way. Maltodextrin is a different name for glucose. Dextrin and dextrose are different names for glucose as well. Fructose doesn't have a different name. But then we have to, like, those are your individual sugars. There's different products, right? So honey is a mixture of different sugars, but it is a higher fructose compared to sucrose, which is your table sugar, which is sucrose is a combination of glucose and fructose, but technically is more glucose, if that makes sense, whereas honey is higher fructose. Anyways, there's a lot of different products, but I guess what I'm saying here is if you can identify that a sports nutrition product does have multiple different sources of sugar or carbohydrate, then that's better than just one individual thing because there's more receptors in your intestines that those molecules can bind to and absorb, therefore you can absorb more. And with that being said, if you're using multiple different carbohydrate sources, research shows that you could ingest up to 1.8 grams of carbohydrate per minute, which is actually 108 grams per hour. So maybe you could ingest and absorb more like 100 to 110 grams of carbohydrate per hour. So despite lots of traditional research saying over 2.5 hours consume 60 to 70, upwards of 90, some actual, gram per minute calculations say we could consume 110 grams per hour. And yet, we can go even further. So more recently, I would say in the last, probably from like 2020 on, we have in the endurance world, cycling, mountain marathon, triathlons, of people training 3, 4, 5 hours, training and competing 3, 4, 5, 6 hour all day races that do happen in ultra endurance sports. We're actually finding some research that might even push that number higher, something like 120 grams of carbohydrate per hour. There's a 2020 study in male athletes during mountain running, 26 miles in a mountain, and they found 120 grams of carbohydrate per hour did limit markers of exercise muscle damage like creatine kinase and lactate dehydrogenase. So not only did it provide carbohydrate as fuel to prevent muscle fatigue and improve performance, but also reduced muscle damage. We have a couple 2022 studies done in cycling for 2.5 hours or 3 hours where they were successfully able to digest and absorb 120 grams of carbohydrate per hour. These studies are all done on men, but I want to throw it out there because I think so many of us hear the guidelines, like let's go back to 5 minutes ago when I said, consume 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour of training. And so many females, like we stick to that and then we get scared of 70 grams. Or we stick to that and we have this thought in the back of our mind that wants to get away with just 30. We always want to be on the lower range. That's the frustrating thing about our brains and eating. I don't know what it is. It's just like being a female athlete. I just see it so much. And I really want to urge you to not get stuck in these guidelines. Certainly don't get stuck on the lower range and don't get so stuck when there's a range that you can't ever be above it. Because we've got new research showing that we can actually really push those limits. We may be able to consume more and it might actually be super helpful and enhance performance and push the limits. We're always trying to figure out how to push the limits of our bodies and be faster, be stronger, set a new record, be our best self, and don't limit yourself. Consider it. Another quick personal side story here, but I've been the last few years not competitive. I've been pregnant and mom life of little ones. But in and out of pregnancies, I think it was between one of my 2 pregnancies, I remember I, was just jogging, getting back into things. And then one day I was going to head out for a run and grabbed actually Pop-Tarts and looked at the label. And I don't look at labels too often, but I noticed that 2 Pop-Tarts had 75 grams of carbs. And I was thinking to myself, well, pre-workout, I only need 30 to 60, right? So I went and I ate 1 and then I was like, oh, I'm still hungry. I ate 1.5. And then I was like, screw it. I'm going to eat 2. Like, I'm going to have 75 grams of carbs, whatever. I'm hungry. I'm going to go for a run. And that was one of my best postpartum runs that I had to date. I was so energized. And again, this was pre-training, but it was just that reminder, like, don't let the numbers limit you. It was that reminder of like, if you give yourself more fuel, give yourself more carb, what's the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing that can happen, I'll tell you, is you get sick. But then there's a lot of factors as to why. Did I not hydrate enough? Like, what type of food was it? There's a lot of other factors, but test it out. Test it out. Don't limit yourself based on these guidelines. And so going back to the during training fuel here, that's why I want to share that we have some new research that says that some endurance athletes can digest, absorb, and tolerate 120 grams of carbohydrate per hour. Real quick, I want to remind y'all, that's nearly 500 calories worth of straight carbohydrate per hour while running, performing, swimming, training, biking, whatever it is. That's a whole meal as you are exercising. Don't be scared of that. Be empowered by that. People are doing this and finding success with it. Now, again, that is probably more of the, just ultra endurance realm that we're talking about here, training for or competing for 3, 4, 5+ hours. But I think it's still important to just conceptualize that. There's 2 other topics I quickly want to discuss when we're discussing during training fuel. And one is that if there's been a little bit of research about something called a carbohydrate mouth rinse, which is literally like putting a carbohydrate drink in your mouth and then maybe spitting it out. I even question bringing this up because that could be like a very disordered thing that I don't want to encourage. But I do want to bring it up because for those of us that are really, really struggling with our gut health during a training session, that there's actually a little bit of evidence that still does something. There's something about the carbohydrate being in your mouth that, one, a little bit of carbohydrate digestion actually does begin in your mouth. So you're actually, although calorically in grams of carbs, you're not getting nearly as much as you do when you actually swallow and digest that through your GI tract, but you're getting a little bit, and that's better than nothing. And there's something about it stimulating your central nervous system to perhaps delay fatigue. So lots more to be explored in that department. But if you've ever heard anything about a carbohydrate mouth rinse, I would just say if you're at the point in a competition or a race or a game where you cannot swallow or chew anything else, like just consider that, hey, let me do this so that I can see if I can survive a little bit longer as a last resort type of thing. Carbohydrate mouth rinse. And the last point I want to bring up quickly is a few years, I don't know if this is still popular, but a few years back, a lot of people talked about training. When it comes to endurance, let me preface this. When it comes to endurance sports, training in a lower carbohydrate state, but then when you go to compete, go ahead and be high carb, carb load, eat the carbs during. And the rationale for this was that if you train in a lower carbohydrate state, you can help change some of your oxidative enzymes to be more preferential to fat oxidation, which is helpful in endurance, ultra endurance events because we have almost unlimited fat stores. So the more you can tap into that, the better. Whereas our glycogen and glucose stores do eventually diminish. It's like, oh, I want to be better at utilizing fat since we all, even the leanest of people, have a lot of fat stores on us. And so let me train in a lower carbohydrate state to change truly my oxidative enzymes in my mitochondria to be preferential to fat oxidation. But then if you do that in competition, it's never going to be the best performance because the best performance always does come from carbohydrate. Even in an ultra endurance, there's going to be periods of high intensity training and you need more, you just need your carbohydrate. So they're going to compete high carb. Well, the issue with this first and foremost is that there's some research has shown some mitochondrial enzyme activity to change to be preferential to fat oxidation. But when it comes down to actual performance, time trial results, it's not making any difference. And the concern is that if you're training in a lower carbohydrate state, are you doing damage with low carbohydrate availability, low energy availability? Are you doing muscle damage? Are you not recovering properly? So this might actually, aside from race day performance, might affect you training and your training cycle negatively. And it's not something that I recommend. So this was a big hype a few years ago, and really our research isn't super supportive of it. I think more research should be done in the area, but we're not not super, I'm as a sports dietitian, not supportive of it at this point in time. There's too many, it's like, there's too many pros to eating carbs during training and performance that I wouldn't bother not doing it. And then going back, because the last few minutes I focused more on endurance sports, but going back again to our sprint, power, strength sports, you can still have during training fuel. And I do recommend it if you are training more than an hour. Most likely that 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour should be adequate. But again, there's differences. And just remember that your body can tolerate more if you need more. So even though the research is more in the endurance realm, if you need more, if you feel better with more, if you stay better fueled with more, go for more. So I focused this episode on during training carbohydrate because that's really what your body needs. We do not need fat during training. There's no purpose for it during training other than, I might add, just satiation and flavor. Like if you don't need it for performance, but if you're like hungry during your workout or run and you feel like you need something that's going to fill you and satiate your stomach more, go for it. And again, this tends to happen in a lot of endurance events. A few years ago, I was doing some long trail runs, 3 hours long. And I did find that having some food with some nut butters just like felt better. And I was also, just from a flavor fatigue standpoint, I was getting sick of some of the like sugary things. And I just needed something that was going to satisfy me, be a little more savory, a little more, just stay in my stomach more. And fats will do that for you. So you do not need, from a performance standpoint, you don't need fat, but you might find you do a little better with some fats in your during training fuel. It satiates you more. Maybe the flavor settles more, but it doesn't need to be much. And I would recommend it stays on the smaller side portion wise, just because fats do slow digestion. We don't want it to upset your stomach or slow digestion of your other necessary carbohydrates. Same thing with protein. You do not need it during training. Protein is super important for building and recovering. We want to have protein multiple times throughout our day. We want to hit our total protein goal by the end of the day. We want to hit our protein in the recovery period, but you do not need it during training. There is some research that shows really damaging exercise, and I would include heavy strength training, lifting that's really damaging your muscle, eccentric exercises, maybe even that going back to like trail running, as I just mentioned for myself, or mountain running where there's downhills that's really damaging to the muscle. You might find that having some protein during training mitigates that muscle damage. Well, you probably wouldn't be able to know that, but in research, we see that through markers of muscle damage like creatine kinase and having a little bit of protein, notably your essential amino acids. So there are 9 essential amino acids: histidine, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, and valine. Your essential amino acids are the ones that can help reduce or mitigate muscle damage during the type of exercise that really damages muscle. And most of this research is, once again, in the endurance department. A lot of sports nutrition products or supplements you might find that have these amino acids are probably going to be your branch chain amino acids. There's actually only 3 branch chain amino acids, but they are essential. So isoleucine, leucine, and valine are your branch chain amino acids, which were of the 9 that I just mentioned. So if you are taking, like, I think it's, as a brand example, Goo Roctane gels have branch chain amino acids in them, then that might be helpful. As far as actual amounts of protein to consume during exercise, research is showing that for endurance exercise longer than an hour that is particularly damaging to the muscle, up to 0.25 grams per kilogram per hour could be recommended. This, surprisingly, I'm going to pick a number for y'all. It does not have any meaning, but if we have a 150-pound person, I'm not saying that's right, wrong, average, anything. I'm just picking that number. 150-pound person at 0.25 grams per kilogram per hour, that would actually be about 17 grams of protein per hour, which is actually much higher than even I imagined. But again, this is for exhaustive endurance that's really damaging, obstacle course races, really pounding on those muscles, downhill running. And again, I think the amount you consume is based on your tolerance and maybe what's satiated and what tastes and feels right to you. Okay, so takeaways during training, anything longer than an hour, definitely consume carbohydrate. For any sport, you don't need protein, you don't need fat. If you're doing super long duration, ultra endurance training, push those carbohydrates, see what your body is capable of handling, mix different carbohydrate sources, different fructose, glucose, sucroses, etc. And maybe in those ultra endurance, consider a little bit of protein as well. Now, getting down to how can you actually apply this, there are a lot of options. And so I'm not going to cover that in today's episode, but there are drinks, chews, powders, bars, real food options. As I mentioned earlier, I'm in a phase of my life where I'm not being super competitive right now. But when I was, I'm going to be honest, the traditional gels worked for me. And as somebody who was competing in running, I wanted something that was easy to consume. But when I was at the gym, more stop and go, lift, take a break, or even when I did some obstacle course races non-competitively, although I was competitive, but I wasn't in an elite category, I liked chewing on things better because I liked the taste of it and I liked the act of chewing. But when I was running, I couldn't chew and breathe at the same time. It wasn't working. So gels work for me. Carbohydrate beverages work for me. Chews and real food bars worked for me. I know in cycling, more real food is a little more manageable because you can put it on your bike as opposed to running. You have to really stick it on your body. I mean, cycling, you have to do a mixture of both, but there's lots of different brands. The grams of carbohydrate really vary. The sources really vary. Some people do feel they do better with glucose and dextrose as opposed to fructose. Other people don't notice a difference. Lots of people do want to choose whole food options like a bar, peanut butter and jelly, something like that. And I really want to support and recommend that. But also I do find that it's hard to get enough carbohydrate that way because you just have a lot of chewing and eating to do, which might not be ideal during your workout. So if you can, wonderful. But if that's just too hard, that's why these sports nutrition products and drinks and powders and gels exist, to get you the performance enhancing fuel that you need in the most convenient way. With that being said, there's some gels and sports nutrition bars that are leaning into some whole food ingredients. When I was trail running more competitively a few years ago, I liked some of the gels that had like basmati rice and mango puree in them, a little bit of peanut butter in there maybe, as I mentioned, because it was like, oh, this isn't just, straight dextrose, but I can see the whole food is just pureed up. So there's lots of options out there for you. I am not specifically endorsing any one particular brand. It's up to you to try some out. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Fast Fueling Facts by your host, Lindsay Cortez. Again, I want to remind you to head to femaleathletenutritionpodcast.com or click the links in these show notes to consider supporting the podcast. Your financial contribution goes a far way. Subscribe to our email list. I'm writing. I love podcasting, but I'm writing as well. And I would love for you to read, stay up to date, and get more fast fueling facts in your inbox. Links are in the show notes for those as well. See you next time.
Well, everybody, thanks for listening. I really hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, if you are a true fan of female athlete nutrition, then I would love if you could support our podcast by spreading the word. Share a review on your listening channel, give us 5 stars. It really helps get the word out and get the show more views to positively impact others. Also, you can support the podcast by joining our Patreon. Head to patreon.com/femaleathletenutrition to consider a donation, or even better, join our membership where you get extra monthly content and perks. We don't want you to simply listen alone. We want you to be a part of a community and a movement of fierce, fit, and fueled female athletes. So patreon.com/femaleathletenutrition is where you can do exactly that, learn more, and join. A huge thanks to our affiliates and partners as well. Once again, Prevenix, Inside Tracker, Orgain, Practice Better, Jen and Carrie. Please go check them out, and their links in the show notes where you can get deals and discounts. Last, be sure that you do more than just listen. If you need help with fueling, it's time to take action. Head to my website to learn more. You can either book a free call with me to learn more about our coaching programs and how we can work directly with you, whether it's the fast track or otherwise. Or you can take our online self-study course, Female Athlete Nutrition. You can literally sign up and gain access right now. You can explore our downloadable products, including the Red S Recovery Guide, High Iron Fueling Guide, or if you are a coach of a team, check out our brand new Coaches Toolkit for teams. You can also just learn more. We have a blog, a Red S quiz to see if Red S is affecting you. If you need help, I want you to get help fast. Too many girls and athletes struggle with nutrition, but you don't have to any longer. You can rise up with the power of nutrition, take action today in any of these avenues, and become fierce, fit, and fueled. Links in the show notes, and we'll see you next time.